everyone, and welcome back to Get Fluent English. I'm Emma.
And I'm Oliver. We're really happy you're joining us today.
Whether you're listening at home, in your car, on the bus, or maybe while you're having a cup of coffee, thank you for spending some time with us.
Absolutely. It's always great to know that people from different countries and different cultures are listening to these conversations.
I was actually thinking about that earlier today. It's kind of amazing that people all around the world share this same experience when they're learning a language.
What do you mean?
Well, I think almost everyone has experienced that moment when they want to say something in English, but they're not quite sure how to start.
That's true. Sometimes knowing what to say isn't the hardest part. Sometimes the hardest part is simply saying the first thing.
Exactly. And that's actually the perfect introduction to today's topic,
Today we're talking about how to start a conversation in English.
which sounds simple.
That can feel surprisingly difficult.
So, if you've ever felt nervous about talking to someone new, or if you've ever wondered how native speakers seem to start conversations so easily, this episode is for you.
Let's jump right in.
So, Oliver, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone walk into a room full of strangers and somehow start talking to people almost immediately?
Oh, definitely. And every time I see that happen, I always wonder what is going through their mind because it looks so effortless.
I know exactly what you mean. Meanwhile, someone else is standing in the corner thinking about the perfect thing to say.
And usually that person is thinking so much that they never end up saying anything at all.
Why do you think that happens? Why is starting a conversation so difficult for so many people?
I think a big part of it is fear. Not a huge fear, but a small one. People worry about saying something awkward. They worry about being ignored, or they worry that the other person won't be interested in talking.
That's true. And what's interesting is that most people don't look nervous from the outside. You see someone standing quietly and you assume they're comfortable, but in reality, they might be having a whole conversation in their head.
Exactly. They're already imagining 10 different scenarios before they've even said hello.
I've done that before. I've thought of an opening question, then a second question, then a third question, and before I knew it, the moment was gone.
I think almost everyone has experienced that, especially when they're meeting someone for the first time.
You know what's funny? When I look back at some of the best conversations I've ever had, none of them started with an amazing opening line.
That's a really good point. Most memorable conversations begin with something simple. Sometimes it's just a comment. Sometimes it's a question. Sometimes it's just a friendly hello.
But for some reason, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We act as if the first sentence has to be perfect.
And that's where many people get stuck, because they're focused on being perfect instead of being present.
I like that. Being present instead of being perfect.
Exactly. Most people aren't looking for a perfect conversation. They're just looking for a genuine one.
And maybe that's something worth remembering. The goal isn't to impress someone. The goal is simply to connect with them.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So, if waiting for the perfect sentence isn't the answer, what do you think is the easiest way to start a conversation?
Honestly, I think the easiest way is to stop trying to be interesting and start being observant.
That's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of people think they need to come up with something clever or impressive, but in real life, many conversations start because someone notices something that's already happening around them.
That's true. When you think about it, we're surrounded by conversation topics all the time.
Exactly. Let's say you're waiting in line at a coffee shop. You don't need to suddenly tell an amazing story or ask a deep philosophical question.
That would be a little strange.
It might be. You can simply comment on something happening in that moment. Maybe the line is unusually long. Maybe the cafe is very busy. Maybe someone ordered a drink you've never heard of before.
I like that because it takes the pressure off. You're not creating a topic from nothing. You're using something that's already there.
Exactly. And the great thing is that the other person already understands the context because they're experiencing it too.
Now that I think about it, some of my favorite conversations started completely by accident.
Really?
Yeah, I remember sitting in an airport once. My flight was delayed and everyone was frustrated. A woman sitting near me looked at the departure screen and sighed. I smiled and said, "I guess we're going to be here for a while." That was it. One simple sentence.
And then what happened?
We ended up talking for almost an hour. We talked about travel, work, family, and places we wanted to visit. And it all started with a comment about a delayed flight.
I think that's a perfect example. People often imagine that conversations begin with brilliant opening lines, but most of the time they begin with ordinary moments.
Exactly. A simple observation can open the door to a much bigger conversation.
And that's something I wish more people understood. You don't always need a topic. Sometimes you just need to pay attention to what's happening around you.
That's a great reminder. The next conversation you have might start with something much simpler than you think. Okay, Oliver, let's say you've started a conversation. Maybe you've made a comment about something happening around you, and the other person responds. What do you talk about next?
I think that's the moment where many people start to panic. Starting the conversation is one challenge, but keeping it going can feel like a completely different challenge.
Exactly. Sometimes people get a response and then suddenly think, great, now what?
I've definitely experienced that before.
Interesting. So what do you think are the safest topics when you're talking to someone new?
I usually think about topics that almost everyone can relate to. Things like hobbies, travel, food, movies, books, work, or even weekend plans.
I was going to say food. People love talking about food.
That's true. I've never met anyone who didn't have an opinion about food.
Exactly. Ask someone about their favorite restaurant and suddenly they're giving you a 10-minute answer.
And the nice thing is that these topics feel natural. You're not asking anything too personal. You're simply learning a little more about the other person.
I think hobbies are great for that too. Whenever someone talks about something they genuinely enjoy, you can almost hear the energy in their voice change.
Absolutely. People become more animated when they're talking about something they care about.
Curious, what's a topic you enjoy talking about?
Honestly, books. If someone mentions a book they enjoyed, I immediately become interested. I want to know why they liked it and what they learned from it.
That sounds very much like you.
I'll take that as a compliment. What about you?
Travel. I can talk about travel for hours. Places I visited, places I want to visit, funny travel stories. I never get tired of those conversations.
And that's exactly why those topics work so well. They're open-ended. They give people room to share experiences instead of just giving short answers.
That's a good point. Nobody wants a conversation that feels like an interview.
Exactly. The best conversations are the ones that naturally lead to stories.
And stories lead to more questions, more laughter, and usually a much better conversation.
So if you're not sure what to talk about, don't overthink it. Start with simple topics that people enjoy discussing. You might be surprised how quickly the conversation begins to flow.
Oliver, I think a lot of people believe that good conversationalists are the people who always know what to say.
That's interesting because I actually think the opposite is true.
Really?
Yeah. When I think about the most enjoyable conversations I've had, they usually weren't with people who talked the most. They were with people who showed genuine interest.
I completely agree. There's something really nice about talking to someone who makes you feel heard.
Exactly. And one of the easiest ways to keep a conversation going is simply to be curious about the other person.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine someone tells you, "I love hiking." A lot of people hear that and immediately start talking about themselves. They might say, "Oh, I like hiking too," and then spend 5 minutes talking about their own experiences.
I've definitely seen that happen.
Most of us have. But a curious person might ask something like, "What got you interested in hiking?" Or, "What's the most beautiful place you've ever visited?"
I like that because those questions invite a story. They're not questions that can be answered with just one word.
Exactly. And stories are what keep conversations alive.
I think people sometimes worry that asking questions will make the conversation feel like an interview.
That's true, but I think it only feels like an interview when you're asking questions without sharing anything about yourself.
That's a really important distinction.
A good conversation has balance. You ask a question, you listen, and then you connect with what the other person said.
Almost like a game of catch. One person throws the ball, the other person catches it and throws it back.
That's actually a great comparison. If one person keeps the ball the entire time, nobody else gets to play.
And if nobody throws the ball back, the game ends pretty quickly.
Exactly. The best conversations move naturally between listening, asking, and sharing.
I think that's something many people forget. They focus so much on what they're going to say next that they stop listening to what's being said right now.
And often the next topic is hidden inside the other person's answer. You just have to pay attention.
That's such a simple idea, but it's powerful.
If you're genuinely interested in people, you'll rarely run out of things to talk about, because every answer can lead to another question, another story, or another interesting conversation.
Oliver, we've talked about how to start a conversation and how to keep it going, but I think we should talk about something else. What are some mistakes people make when they're talking to someone new?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think the biggest mistake isn't saying the wrong thing.
Really?
What do you think it is? Trying too hard.
That's probably true.
I think many people put a lot of pressure on themselves. They want to sound intelligent, funny, confident, interesting, and suddenly the conversation starts feeling like a performance.
I know exactly what you mean. Instead of enjoying the conversation, they're focused on making a good impression.
Exactly. And ironically, that's often what makes people seem less natural.
I once met someone who spent almost the entire conversation talking about their achievements, their job, their accomplishments, their travels.
Let me guess. You didn't get to say much.
Almost nothing. And the funny thing is, they were probably trying to impress everyone.
That's actually a very common mistake. People think a conversation is an opportunity to prove themselves, but most people aren't looking to be impressed. They're looking to connect.
That's such an important difference.
Another mistake is worrying too much about making mistakes, especially when you're speaking a language you're still learning.
Oh, that's a big one.
I've met people who stay quiet because they're afraid of saying something incorrectly. But the truth is, most people don't care nearly as much as we think they do.
That's true. Most people are paying more attention to the conversation than to your grammar.
And sometimes they aren't even paying attention to your mistakes at all.
They're probably busy worrying about their own mistakes.
Exactly.
I think another mistake is trying to fill every moment of silence. Some people become uncomfortable the second there's a pause.
That's a great point. A short silence doesn't mean the conversation is failing. Sometimes people are just thinking.
Or enjoying the moment.
Exactly. Not every second needs to be filled with words.
So maybe the lesson here is simple. You don't need to be perfect, you don't need to impress everyone, and you definitely don't need to have all the right answers.
You just need to be yourself and give the conversation room to grow naturally.
And honestly, that's usually enough. Oliver, we've been talking about starting conversations as if everyone feels the same level of comfort around people. But that's not really true, is it?
Not at all. Some people can walk into a room full of strangers and feel completely relaxed. Others feel nervous before they even say their first word.
Have you always been comfortable talking to new people?
Definitely not. If you had met me when I was younger, you probably wouldn't believe it's the same person.
Really?
Yeah, I was very shy. I wasn't the kind of person who would start conversations. I usually waited for other people to talk to me first.
Interesting. What do you think made you feel that way?
I think I was afraid of being judged. I worried about saying something silly or awkward, and because of that, I spent a lot of time staying quiet.
I think a lot of people listening can relate to that, especially when they're speaking English.
Absolutely. When you're learning a language, it can feel like there's even more pressure. You're not only thinking about what to say, you're also thinking about vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, all at the same time.
That sounds exhausting.
Sometimes it is, but I've learned something over the years.
What's that?
Confidence usually comes after action, not before it.
That's a powerful idea.
Most people think they need to feel confident before they start talking, but in my experience, confidence grows from having conversations, making mistakes, and realizing that everything is okay.
I think that makes so much sense. Waiting to feel completely ready can take forever.
Exactly. And honestly, some of the friendliest people I've ever met were shy. They weren't loud, they weren't the center of attention, they were simply kind, curious, and willing to talk.
I like that, because sometimes people confuse being shy with being bad at conversations.
And they're not the same thing at all. You can be a quiet person and still have amazing conversations.
That's such an important reminder. You don't have to change your personality to connect with people.
Exactly. You don't have to become the most outgoing person in the room. You just need the courage to start with one sentence.
And who knows, that one sentence might lead to a conversation you'll never forget.
And every great conversation starts the same way, with someone deciding to say hello.
Oliver, let's imagine someone listening to us right now is thinking, okay, I understand the idea, but what do I actually say when I meet someone?
That's fair. Sometimes people don't need a complicated strategy. They just need a simple place to start.
Exactly. Because I think most conversations aren't difficult once they've started. The hardest part is often those first few seconds.
I completely agree. And one thing I've noticed is that the best conversation starters are usually connected to the situation you're already in.
What do you mean?
Well, imagine you're at a party. Instead of trying to think of something clever, you might simply ask, "How do you know the host?"
That's a great example. It's natural, it's easy to answer, and it immediately gives the other person something to talk about.
Exactly. And the answer often creates new directions for the conversation.
I think that's what makes a good conversation starter. It's not just a question, it's a question that opens a door.
I like that. A question that opens a door.
For example, if you're attending an event, you could ask someone, "Have you been here before?"
And suddenly you're talking about previous experiences, favorite events, or even how they found out about the place.
What about when you're traveling?
That's one of the easiest situations, actually. People are often more open to conversations when they're traveling. You can ask something simple like, "Where are you visiting from?"
I love that question. I've had some surprisingly long conversations that started with those 4 words.
It's funny how something so simple can lead to so many stories.
And stories are really the secret, aren't they?
Absolutely. The best conversation starters invite people to share experiences rather than give short answers.
You know, one question I genuinely like asking people is, what do you enjoy doing in your free time?
That's a good one. People usually become more animated when they talk about things they love.
Exactly. You can almost see their face light up.
And when people are excited about what they're talking about, the conversation becomes much easier for everyone.
So maybe a good conversation starter isn't about finding the perfect words.
It's about showing genuine interest.
Because people often forget exactly what was asked.
But they usually remember how the conversation made them feel.
And feeling heard is one of the best feelings there is. You know, Oliver, all this talk about conversations is making me think about some of the people I've met over the years. And honestly, it's kind of amazing how a simple conversation can change your day.
Or even your life sometimes.
That's true. Have you ever had a conversation with a complete stranger that you still remember years later?
Actually, yes. I was traveling alone a few years ago, and I was sitting in a small train station waiting for a delayed train. At first, I was just looking at my phone and minding my own business.
Sounds familiar already?
It probably does. Anyway, there was an older man sitting nearby. We ended up making eye contact a few times, and eventually he made a comment about the weather.
Sounds like a classic conversation starter.
Exactly. Nothing special, just a simple comment. But somehow that small interaction turned into a conversation that lasted almost an hour.
What did you talk about?
A little bit of everything. Travel, family, work, life experiences. I remember he told me stories about places he had visited decades ago. And what stayed with me wasn't the details. It was the way he spoke about life with so much gratitude.
I love that. Sometimes you meet someone for a short time, but they leave a lasting impression.
Exactly. And what about you? Do you have a conversation you'll never forget?
Actually, yes. A few years ago, I was sitting alone in a cafe reading a book. A woman sitting nearby noticed the book and asked if I was enjoying it.
Just like that?
Just like that. A simple question. And before I knew it, we were talking about books, travel, goals, and all sorts of things.
That's amazing.
The funny thing is, I almost gave a very short answer and went back to my book. But for some reason, I decided to keep talking.
And that changed everything.
It did. We became friends, and we still talk time to time.
That's a great reminder. You never really know where a conversation might lead.
Exactly. Most meaningful conversations don't announce themselves beforehand. They often begin with something ordinary.
A question, a comment, a smile, a simple hello.
And maybe that's the biggest lesson from today's episode.
Maybe starting a conversation doesn't require perfect English, perfect confidence, or perfect timing.
Sometimes all it takes is a small moment of courage.
And that small moment can open the door to something unforgettable.
Before we finish today's episode, Oliver, I have a question.
Okay, let's hear it.
Playful. Imagine one of our listeners is going to meet someone new this week. Maybe at work, at school, while traveling, or even online. What's one piece of advice you would give them?
Just one?
Okay, maybe two.
I think the first thing I'd say is this: don't put so much pressure on yourself. Most people walk into a conversation thinking, I hope I don't say anything wrong. But that's the wrong focus.
So what should they focus on instead?
The other person. Be curious. Listen carefully. Ask questions. The more interested you are, the less nervous you'll usually feel.
I love that. It's funny because when we're nervous, we tend to focus completely on ourselves, how we sound, what we're saying, whether we're making mistakes.
Exactly. And sometimes the easiest way to relax is to shift your attention outward.
That's actually really good advice. For me, I think my advice would be don't be afraid of simple conversations.
What do you mean?
I think people often believe that memorable conversations have to be deep, exciting, or incredibly interesting. But that's not always true. Some of the nicest conversations I've had started with something very ordinary.
That's a great point. People underestimate the power of simple moments.
Exactly. A question about someone's weekend, a comment about the weather, talking about a movie you watched recently. Those things might seem small, but they're often where real connections begin.
And the truth is, every friendship starts as a conversation between two strangers.
I've never thought about it that way, but you're right. Every friend you've ever had was once someone you didn't know.
Exactly, which means every new conversation carries a little bit of possibility.
So here's our challenge for everyone listening today. Sometime this week, start one conversation. Just one.
It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be with a large group of people.
Maybe it's a classmate. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's someone you're standing next to while waiting in line.
Just take that first step.
And we'd love to hear from you. What's the hardest part about starting a conversation in English?
And what conversation starter do you use most often?
Leave a comment and let us know.
We always enjoy hearing your stories.
And who knows, maybe your next conversation is closer than you think.